Hi everyone, welcome to the Shauna and Joe Show. We're back for a third time. Sorry we haven't been around for a while. This dude over here decided to go backpacking around Thailand and Cambodia.
Yes.
And I am jealous, not gonna lie. Thanks to everyone that has watched our first two shows and that has commented and left feedback. Keep doing it because we need your input just as much as we need ourselves. So yeah, let's just get into it. Today we are going to talk about why we think and why others think that young parents are often perceived as being bad parents, and also just, you know, have a quick discussion about what it takes for those parents to just step up to the mark and be the best that they can be.
Absolutely, and we're going to start with some statistics from the National Statistics website. Now these statistics suggest that young mothers are more likely to drink and smoke during pregnancy, less likely to breastfeed, have a higher risk of suffering poor mental health whilst their child is young, and a greater likelihood of social exclusion. So, I mean, the first one, the other thing I wanted to mention is some people argue, though, that the vulnerability is more linked to poverty and disadvantage rather than the age of a parent, so the youthfulness of a parent itself. Let's start at the top. More likely to smoke and drink during pregnancy.
I mean, who are we to say that that's not more likely? We didn't do the study, we didn't do the research, but like all studies, the subject area is too small. You can never fully research and interview everybody that this applies to, and so it's all relative. But with things like drinking and smoking, a lot of the time, like smoking especially, it's an addiction, and you can be addicted to that at any age whatsoever. And you know, some people smoke at more stressful times in their lives, and sometimes that happens to be when they're pregnant and sometimes it doesn't. I think it's a bit unfair to kind of label young mothers as those that, you know, are likely to do that, really.
Gotta say, I definitely don't condone that. Smoking during pregnancy is not the one, but I don't think it's down to the age. I think any age you can do that. Like you said, it's an addiction, so if you're addicted, you know, that's a struggle. The next one is less likely to breastfeed, and I personally thought that this might be down to education. You know, the education of young people. The older you are, maybe the more you're aware of the health benefits of breast milk compared to maybe someone who's younger and hasn't been told those kind of things.
And I mean, I can understand why people would think that, but speaking from my own personal experience and from other mothers that I know, when you first give birth to your child and you're in the hospital, the midwives are so hot on you for breastfeeding, no matter what age you are. And if you choose not to breastfeed, or if you're unable to breastfeed, or your child's struggling to take milk, the midwives kind of make you feel bad and almost make you feel like an inadequate mother because you're not doing it. And so I wouldn't necessarily say is a educational thing.
So the information's out there, but it's kind of drilled into you kind of thing.
What I would say is perhaps young mothers are less likely to breastfeed because of the media's portrayal of body image. If a lot of young mothers are worried about their body shape changing too much and their breasts becoming more droopy, and you know, the celebrities publicising that they don't breastfeed, or
don't
you know,
give birth,
or they have elective cesareans and things like that, a younger mother may, you know, be a lot more conscious of that than an older mother.
Okay, and that's another thing that's down to the media. Have a higher risk of suffering poor mental health whilst their child is young. And my opinion on this is that as we grow through life, you know, we grow in how we deal with things, and we're able to cope with more and more things, I think, as we grow. But I don't think it's down to the age you are, it's down to the experience and what you've been through. So I guess they're saying that the younger mums have a higher chance of suffering mental health, but I think it's just down to how much you've been through in your life. You know, it's what you've learned to deal with, and that can be any age. You know, you can be 40 years old, not been through much in your life, and find it really difficult to cope.
I think that, you know, people can suffer with mental health at any age, obviously, and becoming a parent can take its toll on somebody who isn't necessarily ready or isn't sure how they're going to cope, and that's not age specific.
No.
But what I don't like about these studies and what's put out there is it's always very negative. Okay, yes, a young parent may be more likely to suffer from mental health. I haven't done the research, I don't know. But what I do know is that a lot of young parents who have had children young, is the complete opposite. They become a lot more responsible, they become a lot more positive, they become a lot more active and proactive and are out there, and their mental health is probably in a better place, in a better well-being than perhaps their counterparts, their peers that don't have children, because they're in that reckless state of mind and in that experimental age, and not necessarily looking at life with that responsible attitude, but that's not reported
completely.
That's not
It's not. And for myself, when I became a dad, I had to step up. That's what you do, and you have a choice when it happens. And maybe fathers have more of a choice, because the mum's the one carrying the baby and stuff. But it is about whether or not you step up. And so many young parents do step up, and it does make you grow. And even my mum said to me that how I changed between before my daughter was born and becoming a dad, like it made me grow. So. You're right, they don't ever talk about that in the media. There's never a positive kind of feedback about that. The last one was greater likelihood of social exclusion, and I know you have a theory on this, innit, Shauna?
I mean, I don't know where they get their research from, but from what I've seen, it's the opposite. Lots of young mums especially, they create their own social groups. I'd be hard pushed to find a young mum in Bristol, where I live, where they feel socially excluded. Especially in this city, you've got like mother and baby units. So if you are young, before you go into independent living with your child, you're in a communal place where you're sharing space with other young mums in the same position as you, and they have that community within them, and they have someone else in the same position as them, so they don't feel excluded. And even not just that, but friends and family and people are just there. I don't see the exclusion. And places like the Meriton, which is a mother and baby school, where the young mums are still able to continue their education while their babies are looked after on site. They're their own community and their own family and their own.
I mean, every young parent I know who's in the situation in Bristol, they've all got a really strong community. Like, they've got their friends who maybe are young mums as well, maybe aren't, but they enjoy helping each other out, and the girls love it. They love going around and seeing their friend's baby and doing all of that. And I personally, I know a lot of young parents. I don't know any who feel socially excluded, so I don't know where they're getting that data from. But like you said, when you take data, you're taking it from a really small percentage of the population. So.
That's what the National Statistic website had to say, that's what we had to say, but what do young people think?
Let's have a look.
I think they're perceived as being bad parents because people look at young parents as irresponsible for the sake that they didn't use protection. I don't think that is a good reason. I don't think you should call someone a bad parent for that. And I personally don't think like a young parent is necessarily a bad parent. You could be an old parent and a bad parent as well.
The young parents thing, I think that's because all the questions so far are linked to the media. And like what the media seems to do is when it picks out on a bad bit, it shows you the extreme bad. They don't show you the good cases where the few are doing something positive. They don't put that in the media light as much as the bad. And I think because the generation of youth nowadays, they keep saying, oh, we're more violent or they're more destructive and stuff like that. When you become a parent, they keep that tag with you. So it's like, say you're a parent, they think, oh, you don't have the experience. Instead of put a helping hand and teach you what to do, they just label you and be like, oh, you're a bad parent. That's because they don't know what to do. And before, you have already accepted the steps that were building up to this moment, because you allowed your child to do all these things and you didn't say anything. You didn't stop your child in the blocks right there where bam, that's far enough, take you back to stage one, innit? You didn't give them all that. Like, say like, for me, back in the days, my parents would be like, blood, yeah, you don't have no girlfriend. My mom said to one of my girlfriends, like, do not go into a boy's bedroom, because that's where things get out of control. Have you noticed? You're in the front room with your parents, you don't make no movements at all. You sit there and you're just like, yeah, awkward moment, laughs at the jokes, like, and that's what you do, innit? Like, you do that. But then, once you get to the room, no one ain't there. You know, what you saying, man? Come in there, let's do a thing. You just make your movements. No one ain't there to see that but you and the gal. You just do your thing. So it's like, because the parents accepted the first step to allow you up there, I think that gave you that freedom, like, yeah, man, I got my thing now. I get my mojo on, you get me? Do my thing, get in, and just, yeah, I think it all stems back to the parenting, because if you never had a relationship between your parents where you're comfortable talking about certain stuff, or it's not even your parents, just an elder we can talk to and relate and stuff like that, then I think when you need the help, because of the generation we live in already, they're just gonna label you and stigmatize everything and be like, oh, well, you aren't doing this, you aren't doing that. They don't. Some people nowadays, because they've given second chances and they've been thrown back in their face, they don't really want to give another second chance, if you see what I mean. So, yeah, I think the bad parenting is not necessarily the child, but the child might not have that information when they were growing up, so they don't know.
Probably some people see it as like why they're fooling around at that age. Like some people, just younger people, want kids as like a fashion kind of thing. Like everyone's having kids, they might just follow along.
It's kind of a bit weird, like a young person teaching another young person. It was like, obviously, the more experienced person in the world, obviously teaching a young person for them to learn. Obviously, like someone that's really young just can't come in and start teaching someone else that's really young, because obviously the experience ain't there for them to learn from.
I think it's, I suppose, because people assume that with oldness comes wisdom, but it's not always the case. And I think that's why young parents can be perceived as bad parents, but it's not that.
Because I don't feel like the system believes that they're not ready for kids, as in they've still got the child mentality, like they still want to go out partying, they still want to have the social life that they had before the child was there. And really it's like not having enough money to support your child and not having that sort of welfare, e.g. a background or a housing of your own. You have to go on to benefits and stuff, and to other people that's not seen as a very good thing and they're not ready for it.
Well, for one, not all young parents are bad, yeah, because I'm a parent and I'm there for my youth 24/7, yeah. But that's because I don't tend to spend all my time in pubs and clubs or stood on the road or doing strippiness. That most of these gals should be at home taking care of their youths. And I love to say this on the camera right now because this is my opportunity to say it. Most of the gal who are out there being called bad parents need to spend more time with their youths instead of out in the clubs or in the pubs, and then wonder why people call them bad parents, because you ain't never there for your youth. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it's more of a... they get labelled that because that's what most of them tend to live up to. They tend to live up to the stereotype that they've been labelled, and if you don't live up to that, then you can't be called a bad parent.
Okay, that's what the young people had to say. Again, always such positive feedback from the young people that we have the pleasure of interviewing, so I think that's really nice to hear. We also took a lot of information on Facebook, so we're going to run through a few of the responses now and talk about what people on Facebook had to say.
Okay, so this first comment says, I think young people are often perceived as bad parents because they are still considered to be kids themselves. I feel like other people feel they lack experience in life, hence how can they teach another life about life? Age brings wisdom. I personally can't say what age women should have children, but I have seen and known some brilliant mothers who are considered to be too young to have kids, but they have proved the stereotype wrong. So, like we said before, really,
down to the person more than the age. You know, that's the way I feel about it. You know, it's down to. But what they're saying is, I think young people are perceived as bad parents because they're considered to be kids themselves, and especially if the media already has a really negative, image of children, of young people. If the young people are then parents, they must be bad parents because in the media, all young people is a negative thing, you know.
And some young parents are still kids themselves.
Yeah, they are.
We're not going to sit here and be hypocrites.
No. And also, I think it's sad that children lose out on their childhoods when they have kids at a really young age. It seems almost like there's so much more they could have gone through before they've got to that stage. But then it happens and you deal with it. But
like it says there, age brings wisdom, and just because you become a young parent doesn't mean that you don't still age and you don't still become wise. So just because it happens alongside being a parent as opposed to going on learning before, you're always learning, you're constantly learning. So I think it doesn't really matter what age you have your child because you're still eventually going to become wiser the older you get.
I think as long as you're ready, and obviously most young parents, it's not planned, it's not like they plan to have a baby. So maybe they're going to be in different states of where they're at in their life and stuff. But I don't know, I think that age does bring wisdom, but so does life experience. It's like I said before, I think life experience brings wisdom as well, and you grow, like you said, you grow alongside your child, and what might start off as you not really understanding about what it takes, as you grow and as your child grows, you learn a lot more, and you learn through that, you know. So who's to say that's something that's wrong? The next one was, the problem is this: a lot of people will either think one of two things, okay? So first, the child wasn't taught better by the parents, or secondly, they had kids so that they could get on benefits. These are the first things that will come out of a person's mouth because it's what they are used to seeing or hearing. There's no love like a parent has love for its child. And another thing people will think is that the child is looking for someone to love because they weren't loved by their parents. We look to the older generation for wisdom and guidance, but when we're rebuked by the older generation, then where do we really get it from? People are quick to judge, but not quick to be empathetic. It's the fact that we are willing to judge rather than ask or to help that hinders the knowledge, education and progress of the younger generation. So there's quite a lot of points there. The first one that I think we should address is people think instantly one of two things often. Either the child wasn't taught better by their parents. I don't completely agree with that. I think, you can be taught really well by your parents, and then, something happens, you get into a relationship and you fall in love or whatever, and then next thing you know, if you weren't safe, then you got a baby, innit?
But and it's that whole thing about teaching. Like, what do you mean taught better?
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? You can teach your children to be responsible, you can teach your children to have sense, and you can teach your children to have values and respect for other people, but those things are irrelevant when that child is sexually active and they're either in a loving relationship and they happen to have a child, or they were experimenting and they made a mistake. Children are allowed to make those mistakes, and I don't think that's a reflection
of the parent,
of the parent being bad in any way.
Yeah, definitely.
And as for the second point about having children so they can go on benefits, that stigma really winds me up, because if you really look at the situation of somebody living on benefits and living in council housing, majority of the time they are not ideal situations that anybody would want to put themselves in. So to think there may be a small minority that do it, and I'm not going to say that there aren't, but it's so small. But that's what gets banded about in the media a lot, just so they can get a council flat. And being a Bristol resident, you don't need a child to live on your own. There are so many empty properties for single people, one bedroom flats, and bed sits to start you off and all that kind of stuff. It's families that are struggling to get housed, and so I don't think it's necessary for people to get pregnant just to get a house or to get 50 quid a week or whatever.
But also, have you seen the places where they put young parents? They're not the nicest places to live. You've got the high rises and the blocks and stuff, and they're in areas that are seen as deprived and things
lifts
like that.
breaking down, the stairwells thinking of piss, crackheads, junkies. I don't know any parent in their right mind that would deliberately go, I'm going to have a baby so I can live there.
Yeah, for real, exactly. So to me, that argument is just, I don't think that's true. If it is, it's a very small percentage, but it's banded about in the media like it's a lot more of a problem than it is. Next point is, there's no love like a parent's love for the child, and some people will think that the said child is looking for someone to love, so they have a baby because they didn't have love themselves, they weren't shown love, so they have a baby because then that's unconditional love, someone they can always have love from and give love to. There's a few things I think about that. The first one is, I don't see necessarily why that's wrong. If they've got love to give, I don't see why they shouldn't give it to a child. If they're in the right frame of mind to be able to do that. But also, I think that's something that comes with having a baby. Once you have the child, you do give it all that love. You give it everything you've got.
I mean, it is sad to think that somebody feels like they can only get love from their child because they didn't feel loved by their parents. But perhaps by them, having that negative experience with their parents, they turn it into a positive. They know how it feels not to feel loved by a parent, so then they will become a great parent, giving that child love that they didn't receive. So all in all, as long as love is there, I don't see the negative in it either, to be honest.
And I mean, each one of these is down to each individual person as well. It's so much bigger than age, it's so much bigger than being a young parent or being a fully grown parent or whatever. It's down to each person individually, and everyone deals with their situations differently, you know. So that's something I just keep in mind when I look at these, because they're so, you know, you have to be generic, you know, when you're talking about things you have to kind of generalise, but every situation is different, and yeah, who's to say that someone who wants that love can't be the best parent out there, you know. This was interesting about looking to elders for advice and guidance and just getting judgment back. I think that's something that, if it does happen, it's a sad thing that it happens in the community, because elders are there to teach, they're there to guide and educate, and if they're going to sit there and just judge people, and people judge, if they're going to sit there and judge these young people who have maybe got into a situation
without offering
anything,
help, support, advice,
what's
then
it all about, man?
you know, it makes you question how they're viewing life in their age. I think everyone always learns from someone that's older than them. I had the benefit of having my mum and other people around me that are older that were able to help me in the raising of my child, not necessarily hands-on, but just for advice, at the least, even for minor things like having a cold and stuff. And I think that's a role they play. Like in one of our previous shows, one of the young people said it takes a village to raise a child, and the wisest people in this village should be the older ones, and a lot of the time that's just not the case.
If it's the elders handing out judgment, then the village is going down the drain, and it's not a good situation, you know. The elders need to be wise in what they say and need to help the younger.
Okay, so another point that was made on Facebook, and I'll read, it says, I think the perception about younger parents being bad parents is that it's undoubtedly easier for an older person to be a parent. This doesn't necessarily mean they will be naturally better at it, but people who are older may have jobs or successful careers, so they have access to more money and a better house, etc., so it'll be physically easier. The way to be a good parent is to be really committed, strong-minded and determined, and not to suffer fools gladly. There is also an element of charm needed, so you can get favours from people. Well, okay, so they say it's easier for an older person to be a parent. I don't think that having money and a job and a mortgage or a house that's paid for or whatever makes it necessarily easier, because a lot of the difficulties faced with being a parent stems from emotional things, and money is not linked to that, you know. You may find it difficult coping with teething, you may find it difficult coping with the terrible twos and things like that. That's got nothing to do with money, and I think that's not as long as you can love your child and provide warmth, shelter and food, that is really all what a child needs.
I get what you're saying, and I do agree with what you're saying, but I also think that having a job, having a stable career, and bringing in a decent income that's decent enough to support yourself and your family without worrying can alleviate a lot of stress. I think a lot of stress in this world comes from money or the lack of money, which is sad because I don't think it needs to be like that, but that's the world we live in, and it causes a lot of stress not having money. So I think that having a stable job and a career and, you know, not necessarily your own house, but being able to pay the rent and the bills without worrying about it can alleviate stress that allows you to, you know, do things with your children more, or, you know, spend more time in the evening with them rather than worrying about the bills and things like that. So I think in that way, I personally think maybe it does make it easier, but it doesn't mean that if you don't have that, you're a bad parent. You can still be the best parent, and like you said, all they really need is the love and the care and the attention, and to nurture them and make them grow, you know. I just think it alleviates the stress.
I think that's a very idealistic view, because I think no matter how much money you have, you will always stress about money. Like, especially in England with the taxes and inflation and recession and all this money talk. The poor people are worried about money, the rich people are worried about money, everyone's worried about money, and so that will never change. So to link that to being good parents, the link, for me, the link just doesn't work.
No, I get that, and maybe the link doesn't work, but then I think if you know what it's like to be poor and you can get by and you can be happy when you don't really have money, when you do have to not worry about anything, it just does alleviate that stress a little bit. But it's a separate issue, really.
Yeah, I agree.
You can still be the best parent with little or no money as long as you can afford to feed your child, you know.
So, I think one other point that was made was about the role of the grandparents. They say an advantage to being a young parent is that there's grandparents that are around to help and offer support, and that can obviously be an advantage. The younger you are means the younger the grandparent is. So
the parent and the grandparent.
yeah, so that creates a bigger family network and a lot of family support. And with childcare being as expensive as it is, that can perhaps help those young parents to go out to work, so the grandparents can help raise the child. However, one of the other comments on Facebook said that if the grandparents are young, the grandparents are likely to be out working full time still anyway. So
I think it's another one of those ones where it's down to the individual situation, isn't it? You could have grandparents who, you could not chat to your parents, and you could be a young parent and not have that support, or other way around. I think it's really down to the individual situation. But I think it's really good. We had some really good feedback from Facebook, so thanks to everybody who gave your opinion. We're trying to cover as much as we can with it. I think it was really good to get a few different points of view across. But I personally think, it's really down to the individual situation, and I think young parents, anybody out there who's a young parent, you can be the best parent. It's like Shauna said, all you need to do is you need to love your child and care for them and put them first, really, That's what it's about. That's what being a good parent for me is about, And you can do that at any age.
And for those young parents who are sort of feeling a bit unsure about, don't listen to the media hype about young parents not knowing what to do, or nobody knows how to be a parent until they become a parent. You can read as many books as you like, you can feel as ready as you'll ever be. You'll never be ready to be a parent. You'll only be a good parent once you become one, and it's that real. So thanks for watching. Big ups to Vince at southblessed.co.uk all day, every day. Thanks to Do Music for the soundtrack, and we'll be back again.